Today's panel discussion is focused around two things. One, the most important is open source has been the mother or father figure for most of the technologies that we have seen in the recent past. Though it was not called open source, it was a free BSD and we had some different licensing, but open source has been there for a very long time. When this word was coined, people started recognizing it. So then IoT, I won't say it's a new technology, but it's a new phenomena, a new disruption now at a tipping point. So idea is to see that why open source makes sense. And I, as a moderator, will have a task where I will expose you to different views. And at the same time, feel free to ask one or two questions in between. And last 15, 20 minutes, we'll exclusively have questions from you. Most of the things which I want to understand is there a barrier that you are having when you're not able to use open source? Is there something that you need hand-holding? Or you want to share some success story on open source? Maybe the drone he is bringing here in the room. That can be one of the scenarios. And just tell us your experiences about that. So without delay, I'll hand over to Nishant. Go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon. I come from a device OEM background. I do a lot of device development. And basically, everyone has a different definition of an IoT, but for me, it's Lego building blocks. So I treat it as a block of technologies we combine together to achieve whatever is needed for the customer or for that use case. So if you see, the combinations are enormous on just like Lego blocks. The combination of technologies, right from your connectivity, protocol stack, chipset, middleware, to the applications. The second point I would like to say here is right now there are around 2 billion plus IoT devices in the world. A number would be debatable, but by 2025 it's expected that around 25 billion devices would be in this category talking to each other. These devices would be of various categories, right from your small headless sensor to probably a fridge. So as you could see, the scale is enormous. No company can deal with this kind of a scale without open source. And the second point I would like to emphasize here is because of this Lego building blocks, there are challenges on which technology to use at what time. What exactly is the product need? At the same time, it has to be scaled up. And in this industry, the time to market is on a shorter time. So open source really help us in scaling up rapid prototyping, as well as using the right technology for that specific product. So that's why this is one of the important aspect why open source is a must for IoT industry.
Sure. Rajaram, from your experiences, can you focus on that how you have been using open source and how it has been helping you in the IoT world or creation?
Thank you. I am from Granite Labs. We do mainly like the product certification side of it. And we work closely with various standard bodies. And then we also help to develop the test specifications. And then finally, the product testing. We do the complete like in product testing with the logo testing we do. In our point of view, like if it is not an open source standard, and then like the things are like proprietary, and then people will have a specification, they will understand, every company will understand little differently from others. So when the device comes up in the market, it will not interoperable with each other. So nowadays we see a lot of like open standards are coming up. One of the things we are representing is the OCF, Open Connectivity Foundation. In that, like the standard is defined, and also like the implementation, open source implementation of OCF is also provided. That's called IoTVT. So in this case, what happens is the standard is also available, the code is also available, and then like there is when the different companies implement that code, okay, there is no ambiguity in the implementation. So those things will interop with each other without any problem. So I see there is a lot of value in that. And specifically, I'm talking about only the device level, the low level, like the end product I'm talking about. Definitely when you come for the server side, because when you collect the data, there is a different ball game over there. I am mostly focusing on the device, the end product side of it. I see like because of this like open source wave in the IoT market, there is a lot of like ecosystems are getting formed. Okay, even a small company can compete with a very big company. It's not a competing now, it's all like a co-working together. Okay, even like a big companies also will make a OCF products. With that, your company product also will seamlessly work. That is the advantage I see. And then when it comes to the compliance, we see there is like a very easy going for the compliance. People can easily get the logo certification because most of the things are taken care in the open source products. So that's my take on this. Thanks.
So Darshan he has a very big different background. He represents the largest software body in India and probably Southeast Asia, if I have to say so, right, at least. He's from Nasscom, which also heads our OCF, as Rajaram called out. OCF is a standard body, probably partnered with Intel, Samsung, and many other companies, to provide a seamless IoT standard which promotes open source code. So Darshan, from your perspective, how do you see that IoT movement in India is going on? Is there something audience need to know if they jump into an entrepreneurship on IoT, or they're building a solution? Because Darshan sits in the middle of this whole halagulla that we are doing in the software industry.
So let me give you a slightly non-technical business perspective, right? There are a lot of entrepreneurs today in the IoT space, IIoT space, doing a lot of solutions. And as these solutions scale, one of the biggest challenges they face is interoperability, right? Today, because they would have developed a solution for a very specific use case, but what happens is as the consumers start to use the product, they say, hey, can you, for example, you might have a smart home IoT, but then they like to say, hey, can you incorporate my wellness into it, right? And that is where a lot of companies start to face challenges when they try to scale. I think one of the things that you as entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs should really look at is how can I keep my solutions open enough? Because there are lots of different frameworks available today. So you need to build that flexibility into your solutions when you're designing it to be able to, because you don't know what is the standard which finally wins the game, right? So, and there are vertical specific frameworks available today. So you don't know which one is going to finally win the race. So would really urge you to look at how flexible you can keep your system. And I think that will help you scale and be as a solution, I think that will have more adaptability.
Thank you. So I'll ask my colleague from Dell to introduce himself and give his perspective. Before that, one question. How many of you are using open source in IoT? Can you just raise your hand so I can get a grace of the fill? How many of you are just going to, you have heard IoT for the first time? Okay, two. What about that section? How are you guys placed? You are in open source, in IoT, or how is it? Open source, okay. Legal compliance. Okay, good, we got it. Yes.
Okay. So initially, if I look at it, my primary experience has been more of the servers, and I was always thinking that since I'm in servers, I'm in a data center, I really don't need to worry about IoT and all. It was like a technology which was like I thought it's not for me. And actually, if you look at it, Dell actually has a lot of work on IoT, starting from devices, gateways, provisioning, and basically there's a lot of involvement in IoT open source products, like for example EdgeX. I just was reading about that. One of our colleagues is actually one of the pioneers in that technology. So there's a lot of work that happens over the thing, and I was like, it's not for me, because we are all like core servers and all this stuff. So that happened 2 years back, but now I've kind of changed, and what I realized is actually a interesting experience. What is happening now is even the servers can also be on the edge, and that suddenly changes the way we need to go and do management of those devices. And suddenly, you know what happens? What I realized is the pain that we actually put into our closed source software, you know, the time you need to install the software, you need so many number of, you know, ifs and buts and, you know, so much amount of installation steps and all the stuff. IoT does not need all of that, right? And that is where, when I go and look at the open source communities, you suddenly see they are simple, they are easy to deploy, you don't need all sorts of ifs and buts. The architecture is pretty simple. I can give you some examples, right? For example, if you look at it, proprietary messaging middleware would actually do somewhere around like a few thousands of messages per second. Whereas if I go to Kafka, it's 10 times more. And if you look at the if you look at the kind of scale that is needed, we are talking about, you know, millions and billions of servers and, you know, data that is coming in, which is in, like, you know, we are talking about terabytes of data which is flowing towards a data center. I can tell you one thing: proprietary softwares, enterprise softwares were not written for that scale, which simply means that we have to rely on this open source, and this is where, you know, some of these vendors, like for example the Facebook and Google, has given so much amount of their technology, and that is what is enabling some of these things. So the complexity that is there in enterprise software, I don't see that kind of a complexity in open source, and that makes open source a very flexible in terms of, you know, enabling the IoT environment. And what it means to us is, you know, when I go and look at you know, servers, and if I want to kind of sell my servers, now I need to also have these environments in place, because there are certain situations that I have heard about. One of the examples is, like, you know, the server actually going on a ship into an oil rig, and essentially it doesn't have any connectivity to the data center. So there are those kind of situations where I need certain mechanics which is only available through open source. Right? So that's where I see the technology that is there in open source provides, you know, simplicity, flexibility, scale, performance, and these are the aspects which actually is not there in your enterprise software, and I think they are not designed for these kind of variety environments. And I see that's where open source enables and is very critical for IoT development.
So nice introduction. So I'll probe a little bit of all of you. Generally, how many devices have been predicted, like number of devices in an IoT-centric world? You have an idea? I think some of you will have. Yeah, in terms of billions, like 40 billion is the starting number. Now we cannot say that it's 40 billion. It's that big. Now this scale, I don't know any company has that many employees who can write a software who can fulfill that. And if you see the number of open source developers, probably you can handle this scale. That's called IoT scale. The second most important thing which I want to probe, and again I'll go to Nishant, is when the workload or a mail server doesn't work, we have an option to sometimes reboot it, not all the time. But when a home, the city, a smart city or a railway transportation, when it is inside a 5G which is almost there, connectivity will be like ubiquitous, and then you have an option to switch off the city, no. The proprietary solutions have a time to get improved because there is a bug, somebody files, somebody looks into it, then patches and releases. Open source has millions eyes. Open source, each of us have been contributing there. So the bugs get caught faster, the bugs get fixed faster, bugs get released faster. So Nishant, what I am trying to ask from you is that if you have to deploy a probably open source project on IoT, how will you take the audience, and what are some steps that you will try the audience to take?
Right. See, if you ask me, predominantly me and my team is working on IoT connectivity. Background is specifically we are communication engineers with embedded systems background. I started my career as a real-time operating system developer. I used to write device driver. I come from that background. Now, we are already talking about millions and millions of devices, in fact, billions of devices spread across the world, right? Now, imagine the kind of data they are generating. It's in multiples of hundreds and hundreds of petabytes. We need basically to make sense out of the data. Now, if you look at my team currently, we, as an IoT team, my background, we have no way this kind of a skill to basically understand the data. This needs a different skill set altogether. But then this is a key portion of IoT. For any project, ultimately, we are supposed to get data from various places, various sensors, various devices, make sense out of it, predict what is going to happen, and take precautionary actions. That's what, in general, any IoT system is expected to do. Now, but then currently, to scale up to this, as we don't have the complete spectrum of skill set what is required by IoT, eventually we will turn out to open source. The community itself actually is helping us to fill the gaps where we are lacking in skills. At the same time, we are enhancing our skills. As you have rightly pointed out, the turnaround time for any issue to be fixed, or any design flaw to be fixed, or any feature to be added is much more faster if we are adopting an open source solution than a proprietary solution on a large scale. At the same time, the community itself is like a combination of industry experts who are working on this specific area for a longer time. So kind of code quality, design quality we are expecting and we are getting is at par. So this helps as a, say, if I'm a project manager, I'm a CEO of a company, this helps keeps my costs down, put my product in the market sooner. At the same time, if there are any updates, if there are any security vulnerabilities which are found out, this would be getting fixed proactively by the community. So that's also an added advantage for me. So all in all, ecosystem development, IoT, as you are getting the data from Nasscom, there are multiples of IoT standards which are kind of, because we are into like infancy, as far as IoT as a technology is concerned, there are multiple standards. Which standard would basically become a de facto or most popularized, time would tell. But at the same time, we have to make sure that the product works across. There has to be interoperability across all the verticals, all the standards. There has to be bridges, there has to be gateways, routers. Open source community is the best source to actually write these routers, or these filling the gaps between different verticals. The third point which I would say is in terms of innovation, contribution to open source as an enterprise would definitely lead to an innovation. Because reason I'm actually looking forward for open source, because I do not have that skill set right now. I am actually building myself to that skill. Naturally, it would lead to much more cooperative innovation. So these are the points which I would like to make.
Good. Now, one more question to the audience. So how many of you can put your home, make a home a smart home, and we all will have a smart home, with a trust on a company that is not certified or compliant? How many? Anyone? No. So their standard comes into picture. Because what IoT and 5G and the smart homes talk about is giving some power to the home, which was primarily with human beings earlier, right? Like a guard. A guard starts in front of your some home community. You know the guard, you know his background check, the police verification is done. But what about a router? What's the police verification of a router? That's an important question, right? And I leave my family, my mom stays there, my kids stay at home. So for me, when I talk smart home and IoT, the biggest fear that comes to me is compliance and certification. Can I put my whole home, or can you as a developer design a home solution which has absolutely no standard? How many of you will do that? I don't think anybody, right? So there I'll ask Rajaram to share that how will a compliance help, and why I'm bringing this topic. Because till date you were writing a workload solution which had absolutely no relevance on lives. It says, okay, you try out, you play out, you crash it, I have no problem. But till then, if you start putting that solution on an e-marketplace and I am going to click and buy one of these routers which has a backdoor, and we got 2 in the lab yesterday, then I have a problem. So Rajaram, how will this compliance help for a budding engineer or a developer when he or she, either in college or in the company, has to develop a solution of on IoT and seek open source help for that?
This is one of the important topic. Actually, when it comes to IoT devices, okay, the security plays a major role. I mean, security is one part of it. Apart from that, there are a lot of other steps are also there. When you talk about like a compliance, it covers like a security, interoperability, and then how much you are following as per the standard. So all these things will get covered. So say for example, like you are from a small company and then you are developing your own proprietary stack. Okay, how many of us are aware of like what are all the recent security vulnerability, and then how that needs to be handled, and then like there are multiple securities also there, right? I mean, how do you onboard the device, and then what are all the security keys you need to issue? How do you manage the private keys, public key? All those things. There are a whole lot of things are there. So all those things like a single company cannot handle. Okay, if you go for the open source, okay, there will be expert. They deeply involved in this. They will create a standard and also they implement and then ensure that it follows everything. Even though the code is like a open source, and then like the security is like you cannot do anything only with the code. Okay, you need a proper security keys, and then like all the encryptions, everything will be implemented. There is nobody can do eavesdropping, so everything is taken care. So in that case, like you no need to worry each and every point in the security or the compliance. If you take a open source, you can assume that most of the things are taken care. Only you need to focus on what you need to do in your device. So I would put it in this way. Thanks.
So I'll probe it a little further. So how many? Can I add? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I think while open source standards and frameworks provide you the general security and compliance needs, it's also good to know your localized needs. For example, the government of India is very concerned about the proliferation of IoT. So if you and devices, so privacy is a big aspect which they're concerned about. So you will see the Privacy Act coming out very soon. The IT Act is being looked into to see how we can enhance some of these for the new age technologies which are coming in with AI and IoT, right? There is a lot of concern about individual data getting proliferated across. I just wanted to add that point.
No, it's a very important point because data leak is not controlled by us, right? It's controlled by my device. And the problem of the security of device as OCF, if you create a framework, a solution using OCF, the security part is by de facto taken care. You don't have to pay extra money for that. You don't have to get it second time certified if you create an IoT device using OCF. OCM is open framework. Now what I want to talk about is, let's talk IoT stack, IoTVT stack. So IoTVT is a stack that is coming from Linux Foundation. This is free, endorsed by OCF, and that can be used by anybody to create a good IoT solution from the top to bottom. So Nishant, can you want to throw something, then I'll come to you.
All right. See, basically, OCF is a boon for device makers like us. IoTVT is a reference implementation of the OCF standard. This is like this is open source, as it's already mentioned, and Samsung, Intel, and others have heavily contributed into IoTVT stack. There are interfaces for all types of IoT devices. If you are a resource-rich device or a resource-constrained device which runs on a smaller battery as a sensor, and then lifespan is a couple of years. So we have a couple of verticals, classic IoTVT and IoTVT Lite. Both cater to different kind of devices. The interfaces are pretty standard. These are REST-based APIs which are exposed. And there are different profiles for various types of IoT devices. So for example, you can have IoT device as a bulb, sensor, or maybe automobile also. So all these resources are already predefined with their properties. So it is very easy to write your application using IoTVT. For example, I was talking to someone who was interested into IoT. We actually introduced them to the code. Code is available for that matter on GitHub. It's free to available, free to experiment. You can download and check it out for yourself. The company which was interested, there is already various forums here, and we would like to introduce OCF and IoT to India startups to actually make use of it. One of the advantage of OCF is no matter how big is your scale is, if you are a student, a startup with 10 people, or a technology giant like Samsung or Intel, everyone can actually use it and put their product into market as soon as possible.
That's very interesting. Now, I'd like to a little bit know about Ajax, which is the other thing which we're trying to explain here from you, that how will a community developer or a person who believes in open source, like so many people sitting here, can leverage that to create a product and solution when they start with?
Yeah. So if you look at Dell is a proprietary. I mean, it's more of a commercial product, right? Whereas if you look at our philosophy, core philosophy is openness. We always try to build a lot of openness into a product because openness enables us to interoperate with anything else. So interoperability becomes a positive thing. So suppose if new technology comes, then you can actually integrate with our products, even if it is coming from a commercial stuff. So the way we encourage ourselves is basically we contribute ourselves into the open source communities. Like for example, Edgex is one of the areas where we are contributing. We develop the stack, we get the mind share from the community, and this is where you can actually also contribute to that. And the way we approach the solution is we actually build two types of products. One is basically pure open source because a lot of customers do ask, we don't want any of your proprietary stuff, any of your commercial stuff. We just want only pure open source built environment. There are some other people who would say that, hey, we trust you as Dell because we don't tweak the open source. We can't conform with the open source licenses and all. But they also want our support and the ability to kind of respond and close issues within a particular SLAs. So that's where what we do is we build in some additional capabilities which leverages our value services like Dell services and all. So we actually create a commercial option also. So these two are, this option is built on top of the open source version. So that way you are addressing multiple customers. And because we are actually building on top of the open source, the advantage that we get is that we are able to interoperate because of the compliance and all the stuff. We are able to interoperate with any new technology that comes along the way. Right? So from a business perspective, the way we would look at it is like we build on top of open source, but then we also provide multiple options as well. And as a technology perspective, what we do is we actually contribute and evolve the thought process by participating in some of those forums and also drive some of the requirements into those forums and build it as a open standards. So that's our philosophy.
Good. So if I have to summarize everything what we discussed, scale of IoT cannot be handled with proprietary solutions. So if you start thinking of a solution or a project, think about it. Second, security needed in IoT, extremely, extremely high, because lives are at risk. Very important to take something as open source, open standard, which has, the source code is available, you can go and fix something on your own. Last but not least, it's such a level playing field that technology giants to everybody is protected by a very good licensing agreement, which world values, GPL, LGPL, so on and so forth. How do you want to release your code? Now, let me focus something on that. If you are, how many of you are planning to develop some IoT product in next, 6 to 9 months, or project? I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Actually, it's inevitable.
Yes.
Whether you want it or not, you will end up developing some sort of IoT product, or you will be related to some sort of IoT product.
Yeah. So for you, the specific thing is, before starting writing on your own, just search on the internet that what open source project exists. Don't reinvent the wheel. Second, go for a certification. Because when you launch a product, be it a middleware, pure software, but at the end of the day, you will touch a physical device, what we call in the cyber physical systems. There it is very important that your product or service is certified so that customers can trust it out. So now I'll probably put in the end of it, we are coming to almost in the end of that. I'll spend time 5-10 minutes, then I'll take questions and more than happy to answer. One thing I want to know from you, Darshan, is how do you see the growth of IoT as a business in the ecosystem altogether?
Taking India, I think there's a tremendous growth, especially we see a lot of companies in the life sciences and healthcare space, whether it's wearables, smart clothing. We see a proliferation of new ideas coming in that space, whether it is home care, diagnostics. We see a lot of interest in that. Of course, industry 4.0 implementations, whether it's supply chain management, whether it is process and quality management within the process industry. These are, I think, the three areas where we see a lot of attraction today. Also, we see again in the automobile sector, there is a lot of interest in new age companies trying to get more telematics, which can help the end quality and also manageability of automobiles. I think these are 4 areas which we see a lot of interest in.
And this all have an intersection with IoT or AI, these are vertical skills. So now what I want to know from Rajaram basically is, if you have to go and certify a product or service under OCF, how complex or how easy is that?
Okay, if it is like a OCF device, okay, as I told, the standard is available, and then like a existing like a complaints specifications also available. What you need to do is you take the IoT code base, and then using that you develop a device, and then you run a tool called like a CTT, complaint test tool. Using that you run, and then once you get all passed, you can pass on this to the test lab, and then we will do the certification. Okay, this is like a very straightforward if you are using IoT. Suppose if you are using your own stack, okay, there is like a lot of things you need to take care of it, and then again, like finally you need to pass on our test tool. That is called compliance test tool. But okay, a lot of things you need to take care of it, which is like already taken care in IoT. So if you use the open source, there is a lot of advantage for you.
So good. I think we made quite many points. I'd like to open the floor for the questions. And 2 things. Before I open for the questions, I will like to invite Vivek, who's sitting in the back. Vivek, can you come to the floor? You can come here. So there are 2 announcements we want to make. One is that OCF as a body which sponsored the talk is a standard body, and it also has an office in Nasscom, India. Vivek heads the marketing piece of OCF, and we can come from this side, Vivek. And he will give you a pinch that if any of you want to develop a product and solution using OCF standard, what are the helps available? How can you go and sit with somebody who has all, like Rajaram, me, or Nishant, who can take your hand and handle with that? So Vivek, can you spend a minute on what is the OCF activity here and where they are based out of?
Sure. Thank you, Divyanshu. So basically, we started OCF India Forum. I think most of them have already mentioned early this year. And Nasscom is the executive office of OCF. And we actually participate in throughout the year in most of the IoT events. We showcase a lot of interoperability between devices, and also we conduct workshop. So tomorrow there's a workshop on IoT. If you want to learn how to build IoT products, so that's a good place to be. And if you can reach out to any one of us, so there's an official email ID, ocfindia@openconnectivity.org. So if you want to know more about it, you can reach out to us, and then we'll take it from there.
So idea was to tell you that what we are talking, help is available, and you can develop products. Now, let's open the house for questions. Yes. So, anything and everything.
So we talked about security, right? Since there are a lot of devices, so even the connectivity per se, there will be MQTTs, Zigbee or Wi-Fi.
Can be a little louder.
Yeah, Bluetooth or Wi-Fi.
Yes.
So we have multiple connectivity protocols, and a lot of data is floating around. So what is the guarantee that all this data is encrypted, decrypted, and we have that no hacking can be done because all this data is available throughout?
So as far as IoT is concerned, data is encrypted. We use all the standard procedures, protocols. Other thing, to answer your question, IoT is a carrier or bearer agnostic. You can use IP. It can go through Ethernet or any other means. You can use Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, BLE, Zigbee. It depends on the implementation and the requirement. So IoT will provide you means to integrate this to your basically the access whatever you are using. As far as security is concerned, all the required security in terms of encryption, other things are already taken care. It's pretty standard, whatever as a vertical protocol stack is concerned. What I would suggest is you can go to OCF site, you can download IoT, get the documentations, all the details are available there.
My next question is, when cloud or storage technologies evolved, we had standards earlier, but if you see IoT, I explored Alljoin or IAC consortium and all, but I could not find it is complete standard body where I can go ahead and say that with confidence that everything is a standard.
You try out OCF. Try out OCM and 1M2M. These two are standards we prefer. But the question what you're saying is there's a plethora of devices, totally agreed. But if you see these devices are based on the communication protocol to start with, which are standard, like BLE4, TCP/IP, Ethernet, Wi-Fi 802.11ax, AC, right? If any of these protocols today, if you saw it launched in the public domain, encryption and data protection is the first thing we worry about before the protocol is launched.
Thank you.
So we talked about the IoT devices and all. So we know that IoT devices has very less memory and energy maybe. And nowadays we are running a very, very complex algorithm, programming language and all. So how we are managing all those things, if you can say in a quick way?
Again, it depends on your implementation. As a protocol, we do not basically this is like a design issue.
So actually, let me reframe my question. Okay. So my question is generally that now we have the cloud, right? And we are executing our large programs on the cloud.
Right.
So we have the data, we have the storage, we have the computation speed in the cloud, but we don't have that much of capacity on the IoT.
Exactly. So basically, see, IoT provides you different means of communications as well as port, depending on the need. For example, you have a very resource-constrained device where the processing is not possible. You can actually host a service in whatever cloud you want. There are interfaces by which the sensor or a device can communicate over the cloud. So there is a device-to-cloud interface which is already defined in IoT OCF, and IoT has implemented it. Assume that there is a scenario within a house. Take example of smart home, wherein you have multiple devices within a short vicinity. So device-to-device communication is possible. So various sensors as well as devices which work on, say, BLE or Zigbee, Z-Wave, they can actually connect directly, talk to each other through, say, a hub. So OCF also provides this kind of interface wherein you can have a D2D communication over via hub. Third point is, again, we have talked multiple times about interoperability. Communication between two devices of two vendors is always a challenge. So Samsung actually publishes or releases one device, and say LG for that matter, or Intel has its own device. And we host our services on our cloud. how do these two devices talk to each other? So OCF provides an interface for cloud-to-cloud communication as well. So your service on cloud can pass on the data to the other device's service, and through which we can communicate. So the interfaces is device to device, D2D, device to cloud, as well as cloud to cloud. So I think we are covering all 3 points over here.
I think just to add to what you just said, right? It's also a design issue. Like your memory, your compute is always a constraint on IoT, and then you should look at there are various ways which IoT solutions have addressed us, either through edge compute solutions where you streamline and filter out and digest data at the edge device, whether, for example, let's take a retail store, right? Multiple IoT devices there. Can we compute, instead of sending it back to the central storage or cloud infrastructure, why don't you do some of that edge computing right there in the store? Because 70% of the data which comes out of IoT devices are not used by enterprises today, right? So if you're able to filter out, digest data, so it's a implementation of where you're trying to implement it and how do you want to do. Like he said, there is device-to-device communication also, which will help alleviate a lot of those challenges.
Okay. Actually, like when you are designing the system, okay, there is a end device you need to decide, right? So for that communication, you need to choose based on your power budget. Okay, there are BLEs there, and then thread is there. There are like multiple standards are there, like a Zigbee also having a very low power, and then LoRa having a low power. So like that, there are multiple radios are there. So depending on that radio, your power will be consumed on your device. So you need to choose the right radio first. And second thing is like the OCF, whatever we are talking about it, it won't talk about like the final end like communication radio. Okay, we are talking about the little above the layer. Okay, in that like we are taking care of like all the encryption and then all the protocol and other stuffs. Okay, there also if you have a very computation is like you have a very less computation power in the device, we have called like IoT constraint, like the IoTVT constraint like that. We have a very stripped down version of the IoTVT is there. In that like you can do only the limited operations. And then here you do all the end device computation, and then all the data you take it to the border router. The border router will communicate to the cloud. So like that, it is all like a multi-tier, it is like arranged. So that like your power budget can be managed, and then your computation power can be managed easily.
So that's the summary, that you have to see what is your power budget at which level. And from microwatt, it can go to thousands of watt in the data center. So based on how much compute you need, you decide, otherwise you offload.
Good evening, myself Sunil Shirur. My question is regarding, in India, we have defense related things, right? Like some drones are coming. IoT means what? It is not main power supply. It is like it has to manage its own power, and it's a limited memory and low budget. In that case, to monitor our complete border, it is kind of taking a data, like drones are coming from other countries. To monitor that kind of things, is there anything like Stack is building or...
So this, what you are asking is very strategic question, some of which I know, some of which I can't talk.
Okay.
So let me put it like that. So there are obviously solutions available, and so I can tell you there are obviously solutions available. Some of the stacks are proprietary, and however, there is a lot of anti-drone strategy that is coming up in the government.
So that is like related to the defense, or it is an open source? It cannot defense. Be a open source, right?
It originated from open source, but it's defense related.
Okay. Thank you.
I will add a couple of points. It is a misconception saying that IoT is always a resource-constrained device. Samsung's TV is an IoT device. All Samsung's mobile phones, if you are using Samsung mobile phone and there is an application called Smart Things in it, mobile phone becomes an IoT device. We have some high-end fridges which has a display and you can control various things over it. So that's an IoT device. So generally, IoT device is not always a resource-constrained device. It depends on the use case. It is marketed that IoT works closely only with resource constrained device. It's not the case. So any device, for example, the camera also could be an IoT device.
The question is related to vulnerabilities. See, the thing is, assume that you build a product now and you get certified from OCF. Okay, the thing is, in any of the other domains like banking or something like that, every new other day, you will get one of the new vulnerability, and then somebody else will issue a security patch, and then accordingly they'll work. In this case of IoT, how is this handled?
Okay, so you want to answer? Or? Okay, so very good question. He's my friend Sanjay, by the way. He has been a developer in Broadcom, just to introduce him. So we know each other well. So very good question, Sanjay. What I was trying to tell you was, each domain has its own security standard. Okay. Say this phone, when it is in my hand, I am happy with 128-bit encryption. Okay. But when I work inside my workplace, it becomes 256-bit encryption. If somehow I work with some clandestine agencies, which I may or may not, cannot confirm, cannot deny, then it becomes 512-bit encryption. So the same with IoT devices. The same bulb, what we are having smart light, at my home, controlled by Alexa, can go on and off, I have no problem. There is a bug, I can get it fixed. However, if there is a vulnerability, first thing is that the cycle of vulnerability, you have to understand how it gets fixed. Suppose I detect a vulnerability today. My first job is to inform that OEM or ODM that there is a vulnerability I have found. If I am a white hat, if I'm a black hat, leave that. That's a different gray market and dark web and all. I'm not talking that. I'm talking of legitimate things. Then they go and release the patch before it gets released into the public domain. So they go, it can be Microsoft, it can be Intel, it can be Google, anybody. Then once it is fixed, the patches are given to the customers. It is posted on the public domain that people can download the patch. Then it is made available that, okay, the WPA2 protocol. There was a crack attack that happened probably 2 years back. I was one of the guys who was investigating that. So we got it information much earlier. Then we fixed it, posted the patch, and when we made a public announcement like that. So same with OCF. OCF is based on open standards. Tomorrow, God forbid, there is a vulnerability in IoT. So the IoT maintainer will be the first person to be informed. He and she will fix it, post the patch, and put it in the mail to all the patch you need to download, because there is a download.
Yeah, and
sure.
Just to add to that, security is different from compliance. Compliance is you are ensuring that it conforms to a particular set of standards. Whereas if you look at security, security can come from anywhere, starting from your operating system or even the way the device hardware itself is, right? And sometimes somebody can even do the snooping and all that stuff, right? So security is a very different domain, so we should not mix it with this. And the security also varies from person to person. For example, somebody who is like, having a trading center, he might be very sensitive to network access and all those stuff. But somebody who's in a Pizza Hut, that's also an edge kind of a device. That guy may not be really bothered about all of those things. He's only worried about whether the transaction has succeeded or not, right? So security varies from person to person, but we should never underestimate security, and that has nothing to do with the compliance. So we need to differentiate that.
Okay. More questions?
Yeah, one. Parshuram here. So I have a question on the implementation part. Okay, so I have used the open source, and now I am using the Microsoft Azure also. The solution providing time for the open source is much more compared to what I am using Azure now. So what is your opinion on that part?
His question was that he is using Azure, which is a proprietary solution.
Yes.
And if he has a problem, the support he gets, if I understand correctly,
yes,
is
support
faster.
And the complete solution building time is no. So that is, yes, that's a huge compared to open source.
Okay, I can tell you that. So see, there are two things. One is, I'll tell you one thing, this open source solution, most of the time the problem which you faced in open source is already fixed. Only thing we don't know how to implement that. Sometimes it happens. However, the ease of use, obviously Microsoft has been a master and champion on that. And Microsoft also is an open source player because they support a lot of open source standards. So it depends on experience to experience. Generally, if you take Python, right? I'll give you an example. Or Linux kernel, which I developed a lot of things I wrote. Probably to me, the first cycle was always tough on open source. But the amount of transparency I had on code in Linux, because I can see the processor coming up, and Sanjay is sitting here, we designed the first processor in Broadcom, doing that was much higher. This I cannot get from proprietary solutions. So when it comes to trust, that I trust that each line of code there or not, I vouch for open source because I know the code. When it's trust for ease of use, first time, obviously there are a lot of proprietary solutions, including AWS, including Microsoft Azure, including Google Cloud. They have a better user experience, no doubt about that.
Yeah, because I'm from Wipro. Okay, so Wipro is a solution providing company. Okay, when we provide a solution to the customer, solution looks for the time. So how soon you can provide me a solution? Okay, so if we provided solution, we have different team. We provide a solution through open source softwares also, and we have a separate team who works on only the Microsoft Azure. So we are able to build solution very quick time with the help of the Microsoft. But with the open source,
as I
that's
told
a
you,
problem.
again, your expertise lies in a domain, right? Where you have been working on Microsoft, so you'll be faster or not. But if somebody like me who has lived and breathed Linux and open source, probably find it very easier to write in a VI editor than anybody in Microsoft. So it's much of experience-based what we have. And there are certain differences. I totally agree with you. Yeah. So where you want to develop the product from the scratch and you have to trust every line of code, the way is open source. Because there you see the source, you understand what it is. Where you have to quick some GUI, something which helps the developer, probably that can be a case, no doubt about that.
If I can add to what you were trying to say, right? You're typically developing solutions for enterprises, right? And you need to understand that supportability, what's happened today in enterprises is the availability of skill. Because of consumerization of data, right? I mean, trying to find a server management guy to work in an enterprise is so much more difficult. I think today the challenge is because the Azures and the AWSs have consumerized and made it so easy to manage services. Skill is a big constraint, and that's where you will see one of the challenges with open source is the availability of those skills in enterprises, in large enterprises. I think that is where because most of the open source technologists are not, they are the new age guys who are not typically sit in these enterprises. So that's where you'll find a challenge.
Good. So
I'll just add one more point, right? See, remember one thing when you're going with Azure, you're also carrying a baggage of like licenses, cost, and subscription and all those stuff. So now that we need to, that depends on the customer. So some customers are not happy to be tied off with one vendor, and that in that case, you might land up having an open source solution much more better than this. In fact, many of your defense contracts and all those stuff, if you look at it, I have seen, at least in my past, that they're more comfortable with open source than with proprietary companies, especially because there are two problems. One is that once the strategy changes for a company, then what happens is the solution cost completely varies. So your decision needs to be done based on not just only like ease of development, but also the post-development cost that, or post-deployment cost that the customer is going to incur. That will land up into your capex and opex of that particular solution, and that may change. And especially because we are talking about IoT, your data size is going to increase, and that is going to increase the cost. These are all the hidden costs that needs to be taken into account before you design the solution. So be wary of what you are getting into.
So good, I think.
Thank you.
Okay, there's one last question because we are almost on the end of time. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I am a weather systems expert. I work in the Indian monsoon systems, and currently I'm exploring the idea of integrating Indian weather systems with agricultural farm fields using satellites. And one idea that I'm exploring is how do you install these IoT systems in rural farms actually to gather data about the fields and then integrate it with weather systems to see build agricultural intelligence system. One thing that's really bothering me in my mind is a lot of these places where these farms are actually there don't have good connectivity. They might have 2G connectivity, or the speed of data transfer is not so good. In such a scenario, how does IoT or any other IoT framework that Open Connected Framework is trying to develop, is it addressing such a scenario of low bandwidth connectivity? Or
again, IoT is connectivity agnostic, but at the same time, yes, there are provisions for low bandwidth connectivity as well. Primarily because the use case what you have mentioned, like a remote location, some kind of a sensing data, you would pass it on. There are cases wherein connectivity is always an issue. So again, it's a design challenge. If it is not very critical, like you have to have a turnaround time of few seconds, you can actually accumulate data and pass it on or dump it on periodically. And then at a data center or on service on your cloud, or depending on your implementation wherever, you can actually make sense of the data. Now a lot of ML, machine learning things are coming up. You can actually predict going forward that the pattern of the weather, what kind of weather which is coming, probably predicted in future, what kind of precautionary measures to be taken for crops and all. So there is no silver bullet as such. You will have to have a combination of connectivity, prediction, as well as make best of use what is available.
Yeah, you might also want to consider a gateway if that is a cheaper solution, because at least you can actually offset the last mile connectivity. That possibly is an option if that works out.
So I'll give you some very interesting insight. So I have a Netflix collection, and my internet connection where I live is not good. So my kids always complain that internet is not good, but Netflix works fine. The buffering technology of Netflix, makes it agnostic of your network going up and down. So idea is to put some design there that how can you buffer data and send into a periodic spurts, as Nishant and was saying, and then offset that. Sure?
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we are on the almost on the end of the session, and we are on time. So thank you for your patience. I hope this session helped you to take some decisions. And feel free to drop at OCF Center in Nasscom so that we can work together and do some good collaborative work. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.